Okay, everyone, we're going to kick off the webinar. My name is Rodney Reisdorf. I am the CEO and co-founder of Veravend, and I'd like to welcome you all to this exclusive webinar for the Deal Flow Source Network. And first, I'd like to thank Lynn for this opportunity to present to everybody in your network. I'm excited to talk a little bit about Veravend and what we're doing to eliminate the pain points in raising capital and how to make it effortless and efficient. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And just so everybody knows, we are recording this and we're going to distribute the recording link afterwards so you can watch it at your leisure. So we're talking about how to effortlessly and painlessly raise capital for your deals. And what we're going to do is we're going to divide this webinar into 3 sections. It's really only going to take 15 minutes or less of your time today. So thank you for spending a few minutes of your day with us. I'm first going to go through just a couple items to frame up the discussion and what we're talking about today. Then we're going to take a look at a quick demo of the platform in action, and then we'll open up the last few minutes for Q&A using the Q&A function in the webinar. So please feel free to ask questions along the way. I'll take a look at them after the webinar, and then you can submit them as we go into the Q&A session. So what we're really focusing on today is the painful problem that investment sponsors have to go through in sending out and managing capital calls. So for any of you who have raised capital, who are getting ready to raise capital, who have heard about raising capital, there's a lot to it. There's the creation, there's verifying, there's sending, there's managing, there's reconciling. There's a lot of steps to the process that are painful for both investment sponsors and their investors. Now, how are you handling this today? It probably looks a lot like this. So on the left side of your screen, as it is an example of the typical capital call notice that an investment sponsor sends out to their investors. And in it are 15 or more individual pieces of information that need to be entered, checked, verified, and managed. On the right-hand side of the screen is the current status quo for what your investors go through, which typically starts with them getting this capital call notice in an email, them having to review it, and then realizing that this is going to be a multi-step process that they don't want to have to think about right now, so they put it on the back burner. So then what happens next? The investment sponsor gives them a phone call, and this aggravates the investor and the LP because nobody likes to be reminded that they have a to-do list item. They then finally get around to printing out the capital call notice. They go to the bank, they send the wire transfer, which is susceptible to being compromised by a cyber criminal. I'm sure we've all heard the horror stories of capital call fraud and wire fraud. And what happens is these capital call notices can be compromised and wired funds can be sent to the wrong destination and lost. And what this ultimately results in is over $800,000 of investment that's defrauded per capital call scam. So this is an incredible amount that's being defrauded by investors from cyber criminals. So what we're looking at is just the painful process for the investment sponsor that results in a to-do list task for their investors, which is painful, that could ultimately result in a fraudulent transaction with over $800,000 defrauded from investors every single time. Now, visualize yourself being able to send 60 capital calls in less than 60 seconds. And that's what we're doing here at Veravend. So our platform allows investment sponsors to create and send capital calls in a cloud-hosted and secured platform within seconds. Investors receive instant notifications and can access their capital calls to fund them through their own secure portal in a frictionless experience and environment. And that one-click experience allows investors to complete transactions within seconds on their own time, whenever they want, and on whatever device they want. So it ultimately is going to save both sides of the transaction time. It eliminates errors. It reduces the manual effort for both investment sponsors and your investors. It's going to increase the security of your transactions and ultimately improve your investor experience and provide them with a memorable experience for them to fund their capital calls and continue to increase that bond and strengthen that bond between investment sponsor and investor. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at what this actually looks like in action. So I'm going to log into the Veravend platform as an investment sponsor. So we're logged into Capital Fund, and what we have right now is a pretty blank slate. We haven't sent any capital calls out. We haven't sent any distribution payments out, but we're going to see how this will all change and in just a matter of seconds. So I'm the investment sponsor. I'm the GP of Capital Fund, and I want to send out some capital calls. So what I'm going to do is go into the capital call section, and I have a couple options here. I can just add new capital calls as I need them one-off in the platform, but we just talked about sending 60 capital calls in less than 60 seconds. So let's take a look at what that looks like. I can use the import capital calls function to upload my capital call file. I have previously downloaded the easy to use template for importing this information. And I'm just going to find my file and upload it right into the platform. And I can see now with a couple clicks, I have imported over $11 million of capital calls. All 60 capital calls are shown here with their individual amounts. And now I can view exactly who these capital calls are going to, what the amount is, what the due date is, what the status is, and then the description. And then we'll take a quick look at what the investor experience is like once these go out. So now that I've uploaded 60 capital calls in just a matter of seconds with a couple clicks, I'm going to select all of these and send them out to my investors. So I've selected all the capital calls. I've chosen to send them out. And all of these capital calls are now being sent out to each of my investors, and they're on their way. And now I have a confirmation that they've been sent. Now, when I return to the dashboard, I can see that I have these 60 capital calls that have been sent out that are pending the request of my investors for over $11 million. And now each investor has an email in their inbox, which is going to allow them to access the capital call, view it, and fund it in a completely secure and frictionless environment. So let's take a look at what that looks like from the investor point of view. So I'm going to bring up the email that the investor gets. And here's what the investor sees. They see a custom branded email from Capital Fund that says Capital Fund sent you a new capital call on Veravend. And whether this is the first or second or 100th time that the investor has accessed the Veravend platform, all they have to do is click on this Get Started button in the email. There's nothing to install. There's nothing to download. There's nothing to implement. With that one click, the investor is in the platform. I'm going to accept the terms and conditions since it's my very first time in the platform. I can see that we're now in as Tyler Turner, the investor. And immediately I could see that this was the capital call from Capital Fund. It's due on March 30th. I get a full history of all the actions that have happened on this capital call from when the time it was created to published to me and when I'm viewing it. We've got integrated messaging, which just further provides that comprehensive experience for investors and investment sponsors to communicate and transact all in one fluid experience. So as an investor, I can click on the send message button on the right-hand side, and I'll just quickly type a message to the investment sponsor. All of these messages are real-time. They are always accessible and tracked within this capital call, which provides one streamlined channel of communications for both the investment sponsor and the investor. And now as the investor, all I have to do is click on submit payment. I have a number of options to submit my payment, everything from bank debit to sending an ACH credit to pushing in a wire transfer if I'm funding from a custodian or a brokerage account. We're actually seeing 98 to 99% of investors on the Veravend platform just fund through their own bank accounts. So I'm going to do it by clicking on bank debit. I'm going to choose my account type and enter my banking information. So just like Venmo or PayPal, I'm linking my bank account. We're going to say that this is my Wells checking account with my account number. And now I'm going to choose to either pay this now or I can schedule a payment in the future. I'll choose to pay this now and submit payment. And with those couple clicks, now the investor has fully funded this capital call to the investment sponsor. There's a few gentle reminders that if they do want to set a password, they can always do so at a later date or right now, but we never require that because we want to provide this as a completely frictionless experience for investors and allow them to set their password on, on their own time. Now, just by receiving this very first capital call as an investor, now I have a full portal that I can access all of my transactions with a secured environment. So I can go back to the dashboard. I can see that I've received one capital call. I've got in-app notifications. If I'm on a mobile device, a smartphone or a tablet, and I shrink this down, this scales really nicely so that really your investors are able to access their capital calls and their investment transactions wherever and whenever they are. So let's quickly go back to the investment sponsor view. I can see that now I've got a few notifications and an inbox alert that lit up. So if I go to notifications as the investment sponsor, I can see that the capital call has been viewed and a payment was made by the investor. I can click on any one of these notifications and it's going to take me to that same exact capital call for Tyler Turner, who we just funded it as. I can see that this investor viewed it 2 times. So it's keeping track of all the interactions that investors are taking with your capital call. I can see the messaging. So as the investment sponsor, I'll just reply and thank my investor for the timely funding. And I can see the full history of the payment. Everything is date and time stamped. So there's never any question or never any mystery on, did your investors get the capital call? Did they look at it? Did they put it on the back burner? And when are they funding it? And lastly, on the dashboard, I can see that everything goes into my secure digital wallet. So I have an available balance of a little over 1.8 million with a pending balance of 80,000 more from this capital call. And this is a great value add to investors and really a differentiator for what we're doing here at Veravend, because it doesn't require investment sponsors to set up a bank account every single time you want to do a capital raise. It keeps everything secured in your digital account, and it keeps everything transparent every step of the way. And I can see that on this dashboard very easily. I've got this one capital call for the payment that was submitted for $80,000. And it was for this investor that we just funded the capital call as. Now we'll just go back to a quick customer story. This is a real case that happened on our platform. A middle market investment sponsor completed a $20 million capital raise from over 100 investors and saw 2/3 of those funds in the platform in the first 24 hours. So they sent out capital calls to over 100 investors, and 2/3 of those commitments were already funded in the first 24 hours of those investors receiving the capital calls, just due to the ease of use and the accessibility that we just saw from the investor experience. And here's just a quick look at what investors are experiencing on the platform. We have over a 90 net promoter score on the platform across 4 different metrics that we continually measure, everything from what is the platform experience satisfaction for the investor, what is the ease of use, would they recommend it to a peer, and what is their customer service satisfaction. So to really wrap up this webinar, I think it's good to ask ourselves the question, how does this compare to how you're currently solving this issue today? So as we wrap, I would like to say thanks again for the opportunity to present to the Deal Flow Network members. Again, thank you, Lynn, for allowing us to have this opportunity to speak with your network. And we do have an exclusive offer only for Deal Flow Network members. You can learn more at the link that you have on your screen, veravend.com/dealflowsource-network. And now that we've concluded, I'm happy to open it up for questions and provide answers using the Q&A chat in the webinar. So we'll give everybody a couple minutes to put in any questions, ask anything that you want to know more about. Hopefully that quick tour of the platform and that initial framing gave you some good context for the problems that investment sponsors are typically having to challenge themselves with and find solutions for. And I would say that just keep in mind, you don't need to be at the mercy of the status quo anymore. You don't need to send out the 15-point capital call notice manually. You don't need to have your investors go through the arduous process of printing and going to the bank and sending wire transfers, all to be susceptible to cyber criminals. There is a better way, and we would be happy to talk about how we can solve your pain points and meet your needs with Veravend. So I'll give a couple more minutes to see if any questions come in. And if there are any questions after the webinar, feel free to reach out to us at veravend.com. My email is just Rodney, RODNEY @veravend.com. We did have one question come in. Does this work for international firms? So yes, what we have structured is all funds are raised in US dollar. We are based in the United States. So when all funds are raised, they are in USD. However, international investors can still fund those USD based investments, and those USD based investments can be sent out and distributed internationally outside of the US. All right, everyone. Well, I don't see any other questions coming in. So again, thank you for attending our webinar today. We'll send out the link to this in the Deal Flow Source Network group, and have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thank you.